Hi everybody, it's Alyce-Kay Ruckelshaus from Threshold of Hineni, and I'm going to do some Frankenpaper. I have lots and lots of videos doing Frankenpaper, but I get questions about it a lot, and so, sorry, I'm just adjusting the camera there. And so I try to record Frankenpaper often so that it keeps it up towards the top. I'm using scraps from the journal that I'm making right now, which is the Autumn Garden Journal. You can find a series of that, and I'm making it from from packaging paper like this. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and start putting scraps on. I'll talk about it as I do it. You can use any kind of paper you want. I just did my computer maintenance, so I have these pages that, you know, have my ink checks on them, and I'm going to be covering them up, so that's fine. I start with kind of some of the biggest pieces, but also the least interesting ones, just to start giving a little bit of a background to it. So I'm going to actually use pieces of the packaging paper first, and try to cover a lot of the back with that. So when I start sewing it, and I do zigzag, now most people, it seems like, use glue, not sewing, okay? So you can glue these down. I like to sew. As you all know, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I like to sew, and that most of these things can be done with glue instead. I like the texture that sewing gives it. Okay, so that's one of the reasons, and I just like to sew. Especially, I don't know, I did before Bill died, but especially after he died, because he's the one who gave me my sewing machine. It was a wedding present. Okay, so when I'm putting down my first pieces to cover the back of the background, I just zigzag right through the middle. I don't want to zigzag any of the edges around here until the edges of the paper, until I'm finished, and then I just zigzag the whole thing all the way around. The reason that I do it in the middle rather than just doing over here on this side is because I might want to slide other pieces underneath here, and so I want to leave that open for myself as much as possible. Okay, so I'm just gonna put these pieces on just kind of haphazardly. This doesn't have any design really, so I'm not, if it had designs I would be making it go in all different directions, but since it doesn't, I'll probably do them mostly just the two, horizontal and vertical. I do want to have like uneven edges along the edge, so that's what I'm doing right here. And I am still going to go a little bit crooked here because the stitching, you know, will show up, so that'll be nice to have going at a different angle. I like all the wrinkles that are in it. That's what I want. Okay, and this is hanging off the end. I'm going to leave that for now, and I may leave it when I'm finished too. Let's see what else I have here that I can put in here. This one here would go really well. So let's go ahead and do that. So Frankenpaper you can use for so many different things. I love it. It's a great way to use up your scraps, first of all, and it's just fun. It's really relaxing to me to make it. If you don't find it relaxing but you want Frankenpaper, I do sell it in my shop, the Widow Ruckelshaus on Etsy, because there's no way that I could use all the Frankenpaper that I create. So yeah, so I sell it there if you want some. Let's see, so I'm gonna have that overlap there. Okay. So what was I saying? Ways that you can use Frankenpaper. I make it in sheets or in strips, and then I cut it up into whatever I want to use it for. So I almost always have one or two belly bands made of Frankenpaper in a journal. It's very rare that I don't. And I like to have Frankenpaper for pockets. You can also use them for cards, for writing cards, but if you use them for journaling cards, the back is going to have stitching on it, and that makes it a little difficult to write on. Okay, so I'll show you this, which I have hardly stitched up yet. By the time that I'm finished, it's going to have stitching all over the place. If you use just big pieces, then your stitching will leave enough space to write in between the stitching, and so then like a card might have like 4 or 5 different spaces in it, and that makes it kind of cool for organizing into smaller things written on one card. But the way that I do it with all these little pieces and everything, it's really not going to be convenient to write on. So I either use glued Frankenpaper for cards, or I put some heavy paper or leftover manila file folder paper on the back of the cards, and then then the stitching doesn't come through, and so you can write on the back of it. Okay, or just cardstock that I've printed on or whatever. So that's what I do as far as if I want to make it into cards. You can use them for bookmarks, pretty much anything. It's easier to make it in one strip rather than to make whatever size piece you need and then cut it up. And when you do cut it up, then you want to sew all the way around the edges to make sure that it all holds itself together and everything. But I think too that when you make a sheet or two of it and then you cut it up into pieces, those pieces are going to coordinate really, really well. And when I'm making a journal, I wait until I've got plenty of scraps, and I will often make a sheet at that point and use that for making a few more pockets and belly bands and stuff, so that it's the same paper that I've been using throughout the journal. But you don't have to use the same paper. You can just use something that's coordinating. So I've even made, and I think it's in my shop still, I've even made a sheet of Frankenpaper out of a Chinese takeout menu. That was kind of fun. I had gotten all these takeout menus, and I just felt like, good grief, what am I supposed to do with all of these? And I thought, well, I'm not going to throw it away, so I made it into Frankenpaper, and that turned out really cool. I really, really liked that. Okay, so this is cardstock, but I can still totally use this. I'm going to tear off the edges that are white because I just don't want those there. Okay, and now when you tear, see how this gets this white around it? I like that if I'm going to be using like distressing ink and stuff on it, but if I'm not, I want to make sure that the piece that I'm going to use is what I'm pulling towards me, because the piece that I'm pulling away from me is what's going to get that little white edge on it, especially with cardstock. Okay, so that's nice. So let's use this right here. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm using big pieces right now so that I can just cover the background. Okay, and then I'll start adding smaller pieces over that in kind of, a patchwork kind of design. But this just helps me to make sure that I'm not going to have any of the paper, the original base paper, showing through, because I don't want that. Unless I have, really cool paper that I'm using, then, I don't mind if some of that peeks through, but I usually am using scratch paper. So, okay, and see how this piece is all like that? That's what I want up on the edge. Okay, so let's just, I need to move that. So today has been kind of my do it all, all the stuff that I haven't been able to get done during last week, because I'm doing a whole lot of filing and stuff. I have to go through all my papers and get stuff filed so it's ready for taxes and other things like that, and it's a real pain. It's not any fun, but it's like I don't have a lot of time then for doing other things that I need to do. Like, did you know if your husband is the only one who has his name on the utilities, then you're going to have to fill out a new application probably with your utility company to be able to keep up your electricity. I had just been paying through our bank account, and so they weren't aware. I wasn't trying to hide it or anything. I didn't know that they needed to know. They weren't aware that he had died, and so when I called in with a question and I didn't know what his password was that he had set up with them, they then discovered that he had died, as if I was hiding it from them. I don't think that they thought I was hiding it or anything, but because I really didn't know that I needed to let them know. And so they sent me this form that I had to fill out, and it wasn't a difficult form or anything, but it asked for your employer's phone number. Well, I work for a company in China, and I work as an independent contractor, not an employee, so they're not going to give me confirmation of employment because I'm not employed. I'm an independent contractor. And so they did give me documentation showing that I was an independent contractor and everything. So that's fine. But it's like those things that you don't even think about end up taking a lot of time. And the moral of the story here is make sure that both of you are on accounts like that, because you need it to work seamlessly. Fortunately, Bill and I were both on all of our bank accounts, so I don't have any problem with that. I was able to use, to continue using our bank accounts. Fortunately, just like a couple weeks before he died, he had wanted me to do something in one of our accounts, and I had to ask him the password because I didn't know it. I don't know, I guess I would have had to call the bank for help or something if I didn't know the password, because they don't just reset those really easily. And so stuff like that, you want to make sure that both of you are on the bank accounts, on utilities, and all those kinds of things. And it's like really hard to know these things. It's not, he was in charge of the finances, so he just put his name on stuff, and there's no reason why that's bad or anything. That's perfectly fine. But then he died. He up and died, and, that wasn't very nice of him in so many ways. But there's just been like all these things, and you think, okay, it's been 6 months. You think that you should be done with all that stuff by now, but you're not. More things keep coming up and coming up and coming up, and I just wonder, how many years am I going to be dealing with this stuff? It's crazy. So eventually, I'm sure it'll all be done and fixed, but in the meantime, it's just a real... It's not only a pain, it's also just this constant reminder that he's not here and that you're so dependent on each other. It's like, I think that we both, because we're, he was in his 70s, I was in my 50s, you're kind of aware that, hey, one of us might die at some point. And so you kind of try to set things up so that you're not going to leave the other person in a bad position. But you never really expect to die suddenly, and so that just happens. But I think you almost have to work on the assumption that one of you could die anytime, because I don't care how young you are, you can get killed in a car accident. Bill was 78, but his death had nothing to do with his age. It was because he got into a car accident. It wasn't caused by his health or anything like that. And so it could have been anybody. And, you've got to be aware that something like that could happen at any time. And, try to think through those things with your spouse and what are the things that you need to take care of. Maybe even call the companies that you deal with, like the utilities and stuff, and find out, what are they going to need to have. Make sure that you have your deed to your house. Oh, my word. I had no idea where that was. I had to go down to the county and have them print out our deeds for us because I had no clue at all where those were. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm sliding some under here because this piece here that I thought I had up at the edge of the paper didn't actually go all the way to the edge. So I'm just going to put that there, and to hold it in place I'll be sewing fairly close to the edge, but not right on the edge. So yeah, anything that you're going to want to be able to use after your spouse dies, you want both your names on so that it just goes seamlessly and so that you can use those things right away. I think a lot of times I don't think we think this, but it's kind of like this feeling that we have, that if we take care of things so that, in getting ready for our own death, that somehow that's going to bring on our death. And that's not the case. It's just, things that you should do so that your spouse doesn't have to go through all kinds of hell after you die, because they're already going to be grieving and everything else. And so it's already just really hard for them. And Bill wasn't trying to make things hard for me or anything like that, of course. We just hadn't really thought about it. And so, so we just hadn't thought about these things. But, it's a good idea to get together with your lawyer, maybe every year or two or whatever, I don't know. Make sure that your wills are up to date. Ask for, advice on anything that you should be taking care of, because they know about that stuff. And so they're a really, really good resource, and it's not going to cost you a ton of money, and it's definitely worth it. So my lawyer, since Bill died, has been such a help. Same thing with my accountant. He has been really, really wonderful and extremely helpful to me. So those are good people. Bill was really big about you should have a team of people. And by that he meant you should have a doctor, you should have a lawyer, you should know your banker. That's not something that most people think of, but Bill used to be a bank manager, so he thought of that. And my bank manager has been, he's probably, I don't know, he may have helped me more than any of the others, actually, at this point. Let's see, doctor, lawyer, bank manager, your accountant, all those people are your team. They help you get through life. And you may not need what they provide right now, but you should check with them occasionally, get almost like a checkup to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do in order to, provide for your spouse or make things easier for them when you die, or your children, or whatever. I mean, like, one of the things I really need to do is, once Bill's estate is taken care of, is that I need to, make sure that my will is up to date, because of course my will said everything goes to him. Well, that can't be the case anymore. And so I have to figure out, like, I have people that I want to take care of my books and make decisions about what happens with my books, or find an author to write the ones that I've outlined that I didn't have time to write if I haven't finished writing all of them by the time that I die. So things like that, I need to make sure those things are in place. You need to have, your advance directive, so that the person who, like your spouse, so that they know what you want as far as, like heroic measures or life support and stuff like that. Gosh, don't leave them with those decisions to make, because they're already grieving, and you make them make those decisions, and it's just so much harder. So I did not have to make any of those decisions with Bill. And I have mixed feelings about that, because I'm glad that he didn't have to go through that, but also, I didn't get to say goodbye. But that's just how it was. He had been dead for like 4 hours before they were able to get in touch with me. So, so I mean, that's just, it is what it is. I think one of the things that I don't think that I'll do this because it's just me, but if I were, if Bill was still here and I knew what I know now, I would probably say we need ID bracelets or something, that have, like for him, we should have had something on him that said that he takes Coumadin. I don't think that it really affected his death, but it could have. And so that would have been a good thing to have on there. And then, your in case of emergency phone number. Because I'm not sure if that's why it took so long for them to contact me. But, it's like on his phone, he would have had to guess. They would have had to guess who his spouse was. Probably able to look and see, okay, he calls her all the time, or he sends her messages all the time. and stuff, but you know, they don't know that for sure. So I'm not really sure how they found me, how they knew that I was his wife. I think on your driver's license you might put an emergency contact too, so that might have been how, you know, but it took them hours, and it would have been nice to know sooner if possible. And you know, maybe if he had some kind of an ID bracelet or something, that might have helped. I don't know. You know, these are just things that I'm 20/20 hindsight, and still like maybe 20/50 hindsight, because I don't really know. But you know, just think through those things and make it easier for the person that you're leaving, because you really don't know which one of you is going to die first. Chances are you're not going to die together, and most likely the husband's going to die first. That's usually the case. Women usually live longer. So, but that's not a reason for a wife not to try to make sure that everything's in place for her husband either. Okay, so I don't know. Is this morbid, you guys? I'm sorry. This is just what I'm thinking about today because of the stuff that I'm working on. I'm sorry. I'm actually doing pretty well today. I have been pretty depressed quite a bit. I started taking St. John's wort, and I don't mean that as advice. That's just what's worked well for me. It has made a huge, huge difference. I just have to remember to take it because I don't always remember. But that's helped a lot. Yeah. So on days like today, which is my catch-up day, I just do better because I'm staying really busy and everything. On days when I'm trying to figure out our finances, I don't do as well on those days. Because I really feel like I've been abandoned then. And, you know, and I miss him. I miss him all the time, but, you know, when you're taking care of things that your spouse normally took care of, it makes you realize, I don't know what I want to say, what you're missing. I don't know if that's really the right thing to say. You know, but there's things that you just take for granted. I mean, like, he always took care of putting the flea treatments on the animals. Well, I had vaguely heard him say that he did that on the first of the month, so I knew to do that. But I didn't know where to get more. I didn't know if I had to go to a vet or what. And I knew that he gave them something else, but I didn't know what it was. You know, so it's like there's so many things. And, you know, and if I had died before him, there would be things that he wouldn't know. Like, what did she do? How did she do this? Or something, you know. And there's just things that you don't realize that the other person always took care of, or how they did it, or anything. And I'm not sure that you can really go over all that. Oh, one thing I would really suggest if you're married, make sure that you have each other's passwords for everything. I had all of Bill's passwords because he had me do a lot of stuff, like emails for him and stuff like that, because I type really fast. And he'd just say, could you send an email to so-and-so and tell them such and such? And I'd go, okay. So I'd do that from his email. But if I had been the one to die, he would not have been able to get into anything of mine because he never did. And so he wouldn't have known how to get into my Facebook, my email, or any of that stuff. It really, really would have been bad for him. I mean, some of those things like Facebook, that's not the end of the world. But did you guys know that on Facebook, I found this out after he died, on Facebook, you can set up a legacy person. And that person is the person who takes over your account when you die. So Facebook will let you do that. And so you take over their account, and that way, you know, you can set up any memorial type things or anything like that on it. And so that's good. So I've set up, I can't remember who I set up, but I set up somebody to be my legacy person. So when I die, and you know, and when you set up that person, Facebook contacts them and makes sure that it's okay with them, that they are your legacy person. You don't, it's not, you can't make it a secret. Surprise! Your friend died and now you're in charge of their Facebook. That would not be very cool. Okay, so now I'm putting on like medium-sized pieces, and see how this piece right here is the one that I did. I stuck it under there, and I could do that because I had sewn down the middle. And same thing with this fabric. I want that fabric on top if possible. So I've stuck this piece underneath that fabric. And so now I'm just like filling in spaces, and the pieces that I use will get smaller and smaller. I'm working my way through the medium-sized pieces now. And I'm sewing, you know, as I get the paper that's underneath, as I get that covered, I'm sewing on the edges, because ultimately you do want all of your edges sewn down, because if you don't have them sewn down, then as somebody's putting stuff in or out of the belly band, for example, it'll get caught on loose pieces of paper and it'll pull it off. So you do want to make sure that you've got that all covered. Okay, I just need a small piece there. Oh, here's some blue. That'd be nice. That's different. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so that's what I've been doing. It's not fun. I am... You know, it's like I'm behind on all my normal stuff because I'm dealing with all of this stuff that you have to deal with because somebody dies. And you know, it's like adding insult to injury because you're already really grieving about the person. And I understand why all the paperwork needs to be done. I mean, there's nothing that can be done about that. It's just how it is. But you're grieving for the person that you've lost, that you really, really loved. And let's see if I can stick this on top of that. Maybe, maybe not. There we go. And you're constantly, for one thing, you're constantly having to prove that that person died. So in order to pay your bills, you have to prove that he's died by sending them a copy of the death certificate. And it's like, sometimes I just feel like saying, fine, I'm not going to pay you if you're going to make it so difficult. But I'd get in trouble, so I don't. But believe me, that's a temptation. I don't know, it just seems like there should be some kind of central government place that companies can check with to make sure that it's true that somebody died. And I don't know why I would fake somebody's death so that I could pay their bill. That just doesn't make any sense. But that's how it is. So yeah, so you're just, it's like you're constantly being slapped across the face with reminders and stuff like that, and it's hard, you know, and it's like having all this extra stuff to do on top of what you normally have to do is also hard, because when you're grieving, you don't have much energy. I sometimes feel paralyzed, and it's like I get up, I teach my classes, I take care of the animals, and then I go back to bed for the day because I am so worn out emotionally. Oh, you also get dehydrated. That was something I never thought about. When you cry a lot, you get dehydrated, which kind of makes sense, except that I really didn't realize, you know, that you lose that much water when you're crying. But you do. I had one day when I was crying so much, and I guess I didn't hydrate enough, and I could not pee. Really, really scared me. So, yeah. So, if you're grieving, make sure that you're drinking a lot of water. I'm sure you guys all wanted like a class today on how to grieve, right? Or what it's like when someone dies. Sorry, it's just what I'm thinking about, and there's not really that much for me to tell you about doing Frankenpaper, so it's fun. I like doing Frankenpaper. It's very, very relaxing. Okay, so the camera's going to stop at any minute here, so I'm just going to stop, and I'll put a link to this Frankenpaper at the bottom. I'll put a link to this in the shop so that you can see how it turned out. If you want it, you can buy it. All right, I love you all. Talk to you later. Keep praying for each other. Bye-bye.